You're listening to the Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
There are very few people in the city of Houston that are more qualified to talk about the allegations against Deshaun Watson and what it all means for the Texans and for Deshaun Watson going forward than our next guest. She covers the Texans for the Houston Chronicle. She also is an attorney at law. She is Stephanie Stradley, and she joins us now. Steph, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
What to you is, just the fallout from where we're at right now? I saw this morning that Tony Busby, the attorney representing the women that have accused Deshaun Watson of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, that Busby has now filed 14 civil lawsuits. What do you make of kind of where we're at right now with the latest with Deshaun Watson and these lawsuits?
Yeah, my belief on this is that on very emotional topics like this, you have to be very clinical in the way that you talk about it, and that you should engage in no speculation based on known facts. Because the one thing that I know from any kind of high-profile case is that you should assume nothing based on known information and partial information. And this particular case is particularly complex. It starts with a civil lawsuit, but it has also criminal implications. It has employment implications with the NFL investigating. It has reputational implications, which you have to be very careful in the way that you discuss these issues because of potential defamation. It's also complicated by money. Once you have money involved in a situation, it's different than most. Fame is complicating, that it involves sports is complicating because of just the kind of tribal nature of people. The number of cases is complicated. And frankly, the style of the plaintiff's lawyer makes it a little complicating and distracting as well. Ultimately, with any cases like this, you have to start from the stance of believing the women when you're discussing these issues and when they're investigating the issues, and you really shouldn't speculate based on known information. But also you should have the stance of letting the facts play out, because it's not good for women or society as a whole to feel like people get railroaded without full information. So, this is just as complicated of a case as you can possibly be dealing with.
Stephanie, what do you make of the timing of all this? It feels like we're watching a real life, 30 for 30 play out in front of us with this Deshaun Watson situation.
I don't know about the timing of it. The legal process has a whole different calendar than the NFL calendar. The NFL calendar just goes, and, there may be incentives to do things before certain times. And, this is when the season starts and so forth. But the legal process goes at its own speed. And, Roger Goodell, in past situations involving in discipline of employees or players, has gone out of his way to kind of say, I don't care what the legal system says, I'm going to do what's right. And part of that is just that this is an entertainment business. And if there is the belief that somebody is a serial assaulter of women, that's certainly not something that is particularly entertaining. But at the same time, you have concern that, there's proper process. And so it's as complicating of a situation as you can possibly have. But what's interesting to me about this is that, because it started as a civil lawsuit, you have to kind of look at what people's positions are with that. The plaintiff's lawyer is supposed to zealously represent his clients, and Deshaun Watson's lawyer is going to zealously represent him. But that representation may not necessarily support, the NFL investigation or the criminal investigation. It may be that the things that help the civil case are not necessarily things that work well with the criminal case or the employment cases, because those are things that the lawyers can't control. Once something becomes criminal, once something becomes an investigation by the NFL, that's not something that's controllable anymore.
Stephanie Stradley from the Houston Chronicle with us here on the Jake Asman Show. Of course, as you're alluding to there, this case could become criminal. Is there a timeline on when that would happen? Are you surprised after 14 now lawsuits that have been filed that there have not been any criminal charges filed against Deshaun Watson?
Oh, goodness, no. Basically, this is, as far as legal timelines, this is very quick. In fact, I was fairly surprised that after the first lawsuit was filed, that the other ones were filed so quickly after. I mean, it was alluded to that that the first one got more people interested and they were filed, but that was very quick. That's a very quick situation. The district attorney's office said that they're not going to comment. And typically what happens is, with these kind of allegations, they start off as criminal, as a criminal suit or criminal allegations. And the way that it works is that there are people with the police department locally that specialize in looking at sexual assault cases, that they handle them in sensitive ways, or at least they're supposed to. And the investigation takes as long as they feel like it should take. So they don't care about the NFL calendar, frankly. And even for like an individual lawsuit, could it take a couple of weeks? Sure. Could it take a year before their charges filed? Sure. And this is complicated by the number of people making complaints against him. So, I wouldn't anticipate that happening very quickly. And we won't even know necessarily whether there is a full investigation happening, because it may be, it was kind of alluded to by the plaintiff's lawyers that, some of the people might want to do this and some might not. And, in some situations like this in the past, it's helped the civil case. Civil case means money. Criminal case means go to jail. And for a lot of people that have these kind of issues, the criminal case doesn't do anything for them. Like from a justice perspective, like they don't really like that somebody went to jail may not be as important to them as getting money for it. So they might have the position that they don't want to cooperate with the police because they would prefer to have money damages. And sometimes that's how these cases work out. Like you can have a case that's a civil only case, a civil and criminal case, or sometimes they never become cases because they're resolved privately. And it sounded like in this particular situation, that's what the original intent was, that the plaintiff's lawyer contacted Watson's counsel and was trying to get money damages, and Watson's counsel apparently did not accept that. Now, I don't know any of the background of that, and I'm not going to make assumptions about that, but that would have been a different direction than what has happened now.
Had Deshaun and his camp settled outside of court, as Busby said on Friday, the opportunity was there to do so. Do you think, we would have even heard about any of this? Like it had Deshaun settled, obviously the entire situation would be very different. We wouldn't even be sitting here right now with all these alleged, lawsuits being filed against him.
Sure. And, and who knows what the reasons for that are? Like, I think we need to let a lot of this play out. Usually the people who are championing the rights of women, it's driven by the criminal justice system. But, we should not hold it against the women making these claims that they chose the civil route, because, you shouldn't be hampered by, who your lawyer is or how your claim is being noticed. If you have a legitimate claim, you should be able to be heard.
Stephanie Stradley from the Houston Chronicle with us here, talking about the latest with Deshaun Watson. From a football standpoint, Stephanie, I saw you tweeting about this last night. What is the requirement, or what would it take for the NFL to place Deshaun Watson on the commissioner's exempt list, where, for those who don't know, he'd be paid, but basically be paid to stay away while the legal issues were trying to be resolved here?
Yeah, that is kind of an unusual situation because there's two different ways that the NFL typically disciplines players. Back in the day, it used to be done by teams, but it was done kind of hit or miss. Like, some teams allowed their players to get away with all sorts of just horrible things, and some teams didn't. And so when Roger Goodell took over the NFL in 2006, he came up with a personal conduct policy and basically said, hey, look, anybody who works for an NFL team needs to have good personal conduct, which, that's not very controversial. What's more controversial is, what standard do you use to decide who should be punished, and how certain do you need to be of the underlying facts? And that's where some of the controversies happened over the years. Typically, they do suspensions, but sometimes they haven't been able to do a full investigation. And so prior to doing a full investigation, sometimes for unusual circumstances, they can put somebody on what is called the commissioner's exempt list. Now, this has been just more recently, and we don't have a lot of ideas of when Roger Goodell decides that a conduct rises to the level where somebody should be kind of suspended with pay. And I don't know if it's going to be to this situation. It might be a little different if this started off as a criminal action versus a civil action, because fairly or unfairly, the money does change things. That money is involved does change things. And so, it doesn't have to be a criminal event for somebody to be put on the commissioner's exempt list or be suspended for that matter. I think ultimately what the Tom Brady case showed was, like, they went through all sorts of litigation. And at the end of the day, the NFL's argument was, we don't have to be right. The commissioner can do whatever he wants for the good of the game. And so it gives him a lot of flexibility to do any number of things. And so, this is just a very difficult, complicated situation. And when you have those situations, it's really important to be careful and clinical in talking about these things, because everybody's listening. People are listening. People who have been sexually assaulted, people who have been accused of things that they haven't done, and they bring those biases to this situation when it really should be one of those things where we need to let this play out. We need to listen to what's happening, and without judgment. And I know that's really difficult to do given how many allegations there are, but that's not necessarily dispositive, because this is such a high profile case that, any number of outcomes could be the correct outcome.
She's Stephanie Stradley. She covers the NFL and the Texans for the Houston Chronicle. Also is a lawyer, so the perfect person to have on to talk about the latest with Deshaun Watson and the allegations being levied against him. Stephanie, thanks so much for a few minutes of your time this morning, and we'll definitely be in touch and get you on again soon. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Stephanie Stradley with us there, and she said it perfectly. This is a complex, nuanced situation that has no real end in sight on what's happening right now with Deshaun Watson and the allegations being alleged against him so far. As of this morning, we're talking to you on a Tuesday morning. 14 civil lawsuits have been filed against Deshaun